Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Level 5 Alive, my short time with Level 5 games. There are times and periods in the history of games where company names have been synonymous with a certain quality of game or game product. We all know names such as Capcom or Konami have built quite the portfolio of successful franchises, and those franchises have, in turn, become inextricably linked to those companies. We know these names: Resident Evil, Mega Man, Street Fighter, Silent Hill, Castlevania, Contra. Obviously, there are many more. Others, like Bethesda or Bungie, have become famous for one or two franchises that have had massive cultural impact. Still, other studios get known for years of hard work in the background, far from the spotlight of these industry behemoths, grinding out cozy titles, licensed games, and the type of niche titles that develop a quiet but die-hard fan base that guarantee at least some sort of profit for the company, but perhaps not the kind of success a massive producer studio like EA or Sony would be satisfied with. That's where today's subject, Level 5 Incorporated, comes in. Founded in 1998 by Akihiro Hino, after he left his position at developer Riverhillsoft, Hino would broker a deal with Sony Computer Entertainment to be the studio who would produce the games his fledgling studio would be developing for their upcoming PlayStation 2 home console. From there, Level 5 and its growing team would spend the decades since pumping out small to moderate cozy titles, fun anime-inspired games, and developing the kind of rabid fans who would see it through thick and thin. But that doesn't mean the studio is huge. Just a fan favorite and profitable enough to stay in business for 26 years in the competitive Japanese development market. No small feat in and of itself. They have best become known for the Professor Layton, Yokai Watch, and Nino no Kuni games for the Nintendo DS and last several PlayStation console generations. Or at least, there are a hell of a lot of those titles and sequels to those titles. I have played none of those. But the titles I will be discussing are their earliest ones. The ones I personally was introduced to Level 5 with as a developer, and the ones that impressed me the most as they were fighting for shelf space among other titans of the tightly controlled JRPG habitat. These games were among some of the last JRPG titles I would play before my turn away from Japanese role-playing titles to more Western-based role-playing titles. And I feel that there is a concern these titles may be lost to gaming history despite their quality, or whatever warm memories mentioning these titles in passing may evoke due to their fast time in the spotlight and being overshadowed by another few decades of flashier, more famously received games. So let's get into it. The first Level 5 title I would be introduced to would be Level 5's first title ever that they made, 2000's Dark Cloud. Originally meant to be a launch title for March of 2000, the game was delayed until December of 2000 for Japan and May of 2001 for North America. Dark Cloud is a hybrid action RPG and city builder title where the dungeons are not set. Instead, they are procedurally generated with no two playthroughs being exactly the same. Dungeons provide a substance called Alta, which is used to rebuild the world outside the dungeons. Quite literally used to make rocks, trees, houses, and the like, which the player can arrange as they can within the landscape provided. Only when the dungeons have been mined for all the Alta it can be, and the villages completed, can the player move on to the next area. Unlike most role-playing games, the character does not level up, but their weapons do, getting stronger as they absorb defeated enemies. But they do need to be repaired periodically. The plot is a bit convoluted. In the beginning, our antagonist, one Colonel Flag Gilgister, tried to summon an ancient enemy called the Dark Genie to be utilized to control the whole world. Once summoned, Flag ordered the genie to attack the West, the whole West, all of it. But that has been protected by the Fairy King. Due to the power of the attack, the West is broken into the Alta orbs and scattered. Our hero, Tone, survives this attack and is gifted a stone by the Fairy King to rebuild the world. Tone gathers some survivors along the way and rebuilds villages across the countryside, growing in power enough to be able to contest with Flag and the Dark Genie. By the time the crew reaches their destination, the game develops into a time travel game, where the powers that be reveal the genie is the product of a sad boy who lost his fiancée to war, and that Flag was just a power-hungry fool in way over his head. In the end, the stone Tone has been using to rebuild the world is used to revive the lost fiancée, and the lovers are reunited, and Tone's party are returned to their homeland just before the destruction at the start of the game, and the Fairy King tells them the Dark Genie is gone. For now, anyway. Akihiro Hino wrote, designed, and produced the whole of Dark Cloud, splitting his time between these titles and being the startup CEO. It was released to generally favorable reviews and was at points likened to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Vagrant Story, and ActRaiser, sometimes both positively and negatively in those comparisons. Reviewers of the time of the game's release didn't really know where to place Dark Cloud in the pantheon of action role-playing titles, especially since they were being paid to make up some kind of bullshit to write about it, and claimed it was inspired by a lot of other titles that had come before it. Maybe it was, and maybe not. Opinions, after all, are merely that, speculation people try to manifest as reality. But the one thing both I and the reviewers can agree on is this game was largely a lot of fun. Largely, but not all, of course. And that opened the door to a sequel. Released in February 2003 in North America, Dark Cloud 2, known as Dark Chronicle in Japan, was also designed as an action role-playing title with procedurally generated dungeons and weapons that level up instead of the player. But this time, there are only two player characters to control. Max, a young mechanic wielding a wrench and gun, and Monica, a young swordswoman with a magic bracelet. These two also have unique super abilities that can be used in combat to even the odds. Max, for example, calls in a mech suit known as the Ride Pod, and Monica can shape change into monsters. Outside of dungeon combat, the players are once again using magic power to rebuild the land and villages, but now there is also a fishing minigame players can have fun with. Our plot this time is one of time travel. Max has the same stone as Tone from the first game, and learns centuries ago an evil man named Emperor Griffin destroyed the world but spared Max's hometown. And Max is saved from a flunky of Griffins by Monica, a princess from 100 years after Max's timeline. With Max and Monica's power stones together, they can travel back and forth between each other's times. Emperor Griffin is also in possession of a power stone, but wants the ones carried by our heroes so he can become unstoppable. The game progresses to the completion of a flying fortress named Pasnos that the pair used to fight Griffin's armies in Monica's time. And during this battle in Max's time, the time travel capable train called Ixion is completed and can be used to travel back in time to defeat Emperor Griffin once and for all before he destroys the world to let a better one be born in its place. An awful lot of anachronistic fantasy mage punk steam technology back to the future bullshit later, the pair defeat Griffin in his palace, only to have Griffin be revealed as a shard of a person known as Sirius, an ancient one whose hatred of humans knew no bounds. And an element of his hate came to rest in the body of Griffin and came to be known as the Star of Oblivion, which Max and Monica then must defeat to stop this nonsense and return everything back to their proper time. Dark Cloud 2 stood out for its previous game, mainly in graphics. Dark Cloud 1 was a 3D action RPG in the style of a semi-realistic graphics for the early PlayStation 2 that system reveled in. Dark Cloud 2, however, went with cel-shaded graphics, which I personally think benefited the game tremendously, giving it a much more fun atmosphere and complemented its goofy mix of time travel magic and fish out of time technology. Hino once again wrote, produced, and directed the title, and again it was received generally favorable in reviews for the time, even garnering several awards for its graphics and gameplay, with one reviewer calling it the best looking PlayStation 2 title out there upon its release. This game was challenging for me, at least in the play aspect of the title, as I lost more times than I won, and a lot of my play sessions were more grinding sessions than anything. That doesn't mean the game was bad, far from it, but it was no easy title by any means. It was also a beautiful game, something like a playable Disney animated film or an episodic anime show of its time, such as Full Metal Alchemist before that show became a thing. A third sequel was rumored to be in production after this title, but never came to light, as Hino himself said the company did not have the funds on their own to make a third game, and since Sony co-owned the license and wasn't interested in a third game, no amount of praise was going to bring a Dark Cloud 3 to fruition. The next game in this review is actually the 8th entry in a very long-running and storied game series. Developed by Level-5 and published by JRPG powerhouse Square Enix, 2005's Dragon Quest VIII: Journey of the Cursed King remains the only game in the Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest series I have to date played. I know, blasphemy, right? The game uses cel shading, much like Dark Cloud 2, and is the first to fully 3D render characters and models, and it very much retains the look of the late, great Akira Toriyama's signature art style. The plot revolves around the main character, known only as Hero unless the player changes it, the only remaining unaffected member of the castle of King Trode. After the court jester Dolmagus turns everyone into some kind of creature or animal using his magic scepter. Hero, along with the transformed king and his daughter, who is currently a horse, begin the hunt for Dolmagus and his scepter, and are soon joined by Yangus the bandit, Jessica the wizard, and Angelo the knight. These four will be your party for the entire game. From there, the party tracks Dolmagus down and kills him, but that does not break the curse. Jessica claims the scepter and disappears only to return later possessed by the staff. The party rescues her, and Jessica tells them the spirit of the scepter, Rapthorn, needs to be destroyed before he escapes his prison. The scepter falls into the hands of Angelo's half-brother, and goddamn if this game doesn't go on forever. In time, the enemy is defeated and the curse broken, and the hero escapes with the princess while on her way to her arranged marriage in the end. Dragon Quest VIII was my chance to finally see what the decades of players of Dragon Warrior were finally talking about, and why this series has had such a hold on people and has developed such a strong fan base, rivaling Square Enix's other franchise, Final Fantasy. And while I was playing my copy, back when game purchases actually meant something and weren't just a revocable license for when the developer or publisher felt some sort of pique, Dragon Quest VIII was massing a huge following, especially in its home country of Japan, where it sold over 3 million copies in a week, becoming the fastest-selling PlayStation 2 title in Japan. Copies sold in North America were less impressive, totaling only about 430,000, but that hardly diminishes the star that this series is. It won many awards that year, even in some cases beating out Kingdom Hearts 2 for Best RPG of the Year, depending on which outlet was doing the voting counting, of course. And this game has had a more substantial legacy than I realized at the time. For my part, this game was a lot of fun, and it was seriously gorgeous, lighting up the PlayStation 2 like no other. A diamond in a title, in the library of gaming console brimming with stellar names. It was, however, as I hinted at, too long for my tastes, even as an RPG fan, and probably could have had a dozen or so hours shaved off of the runtime. Yet despite my praise for this game, it did not inspire me to seek out further Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest titles, which, well, I'm kind of surprised about, even for myself. Oh well. If nothing else, I got to see the random battle turn-based Metal Slime with my own eyes. Early in 2007, and very late in the life cycle of the PlayStation 2, we would get the last of the Level 5 games I would ever play. The director's cut of the previously Japan exclusive game Rogue Galaxy. Rogue Galaxy is a sword and planet space opera, much like Star Wars, only actually fun and not bloated by either George Lucas bullshit lore or, even worse, Disney bullshit lore. But what it is bloated by is its own self indulgence and damnable adherence to Japanese role playing game tropes. This is an action role playing title, much like Level 5's earlier Dark Cloud games. And while battles are entered into randomly in the overworld, like many RPGs and JRPGs, the actual combat is real time hack and slash similar to the battles in Star Ocean, where the player controls the main character and his two assisting characters fight independently through the game's artificial intelligence. The game stars the improbably named Jaster Rogue, a young man from a desert planet, not unlike a certain other young man in a galaxy far, far away, looking to get away from his retrofuturistic technobabble planet so he's not stuck farming under the thumb of the oppressive Longardian army. And he gets his chance after a series of hijinks and escapes on the interplanetary pirate ship named Dorganak, which I suppose for sci-fi and fantasy is as good a name as any. The crew soon becomes his sidekicks, from charming pirates to androids to alien creatures, all seeking the same thing: the hiring of the famed bounty hunter Desert Claw. But what the crew does find itself involved in before long is a galaxy-wide quest to uncover secrets buried for 10,000 years, an evil space empire seeking to control it all through the mystic MacGuffin horseshit, and somehow Jaster will solve it all with his magic space sword and his chosen one archetype plot armor powers. Akihiro Hino, once again in the role of writer, director, producer, as he so often has been, talked a big game about Rogue Galaxy in Famitsu in an interview, saying, quote, "As a creator, I always wanted to create a title that was as big as Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy. I believe Rogue Galaxy is on the same scale. This title will be our challenge to all the RPGs in the world." End quote. Sadly, that challenge would not come to pass. In North America and Europe, the game would release to generally favorable reviews, but many reviewers were critical of the plot, characters, battle system, and inability of the game to push past the conventions of the genre or push them forward in any meaningful way. And Simon Parkin of Eurogamer stated the release of Final Fantasy XII had placed, quote, "an unrealized burden of expectation," end quote, upon the game. I would argue instead that Mass Effect, which would release in November of 2007, would do this space opera technobabble horseshit far better, and far more memorably than what Rogue Galaxy attempted. To be honest, I never finished this one. By then, my Xbox 360 was getting more time and attention than my PS2, and with Rogue Galaxy at the end of the hardware life cycle, it seemed doomed to fall with it. And, well, considering one of my first Xbox 360 purchases was, in fact, Mass Effect, well, the writing was on the wall for Rogue Galaxy. The fact that we didn't get a sequel speaks even louder. I do commend Hino and the Level 5 team for literally aiming for the stars with this title, seeking to make a new series of the scope and scale as the famed Square Enix brand of game. But not every title or every studio can burn as brightly or sustain that level of production for very long. And lest does the gaming public want to be burdened with that kind of epic game of insurmountable hours and unfathomable story elements without end. Even RPG fans get tired sometimes and just want to sit down with a simple shooter now and then. All that being said, I'm glad Level 5 is still around, having found their niche in cozy puzzle games and the occasional light to mid-level fantasy role-playing titles. The studio and their games were a guilty pleasure for me. Games I definitely enjoyed even if I did not finish all of them, for just seeming to take up too much time and bandwidth to play. Yet my entire time with them lived and died exclusively on the PlayStation 2, a console itself that, compared to its contemporaries and even today, far outlived its own lifespan and cemented itself a place in gaming history yet completely unmatched by another of these little digital toys we so love to play. They were, in their own way, the blueprint of the small independent studio, churning out reliable titles at a reliable rate that were certainly charming and worthy of attention, but were in no way going to shake the very pillars of gaming heaven with their output. And that's okay. The very idea of triple A and Christ help us quadruple A studios and game titles has already worn itself, and by extension ourselves, quite thin with its bland, cookie cutter, everything in the kitchen sink, all things to all people style and method of construction that soon causes one title to blend harmlessly and disinterestedly into another. The soy product of the digital realm. Level 5 tried to do things their own way. From a few folks done working for others to grow to a 300-person development stalwart that managed on their own the first time to try and swing for the myopic vision of the cyclopean monster that is Sony Entertainment their way and gain the blessing of our Lord and Savior PlayStation 2 right from the start. It was a short and bright and beautiful cel-shaded love affair I had with Level 5 during the halcyon days of the console. When I was young, and so were they, and care seemed farther away and stakes were smaller. It's hard to chase after that feeling again in a world very far and much changed from the year 2000. And for those who find these games now and Level 5 as a company, I hope they were able to bring all the joy of discovery they brought to me so long ago. If you haven't ever tried any of these games that I spoke of, please do so. Even if you don't finish them, they are still worth your time. I mean, hell, there's a Dragon Quest game in there I played all the way to the end, so it can't be all that bad. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Orden Wells, Mass Lama, and Martin Kubel for being patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.